Welcome to another edition of the Sim Racing Garage. I am Barry Rowland. In this episode, we'll be reviewing the SimLab's latest flagship aluminum profile cockpit kit, the P1-X. Thankfully, SimLab did not change the previous P1's basic configuration, and only added features that improve on what is my current go-to cockpit for everyday driving and review duties. Time to put the P1-X through the SRG's review process and see how it does. So, let's get to it. So I thought I would talk a little bit about the hardware that we're going to be using to assemble this kit with. And for the uninitiated, it can be a little bit intimidating, but it's really rather simple once you've done it a few times and get the general grasp of how it works. It's pretty simple stuff. We have the aluminum extrusion, and this is the smallest piece or diameter that we get in this kit. This is called a 4040 because it has a 40 millimeter square piece on each side. And yeah, there's channels, as you can see, in each side also. And in these channels, we'll be putting what we call T-nuts, right? So that we can put, and they have threads in these T-nuts so that we can actually affix things to the actual profile. And these particular T-nuts, now there's different variations of T-nuts and corner brackets that we can get, but we're going to just be focusing on what we're using for this kit. And these are actually very nice units. These are stainless steel, what they call spring ball. They have a little spring ball in them there that maintains tension while we're in the channel of our aluminum extrusion or profile. And we also have a threaded bit on one side. And this particular one is an M8 thread, which is in a 1.25 pitch. And that's typically what you'll see in most aluminum extrusions or 80-20 profile rigs for the assembly pieces. We also have included in this kit a 6mm or M6 thread for attaching peripherals or shifters or things like that. And of course, we're going to have corresponding bolts that fit all this. Now you can see that once we have the T-nut in, and typically what I'll do is load my T-nuts into the location where I'm going to be putting a bracket or whatever I'm mounting. And speaking of brackets, these are the corner brackets that come with the kit. Now they call these gusseted corner brackets, which means these metal pieces here that join this L bracket. Basically, it's an L bracket with the metal reinforcements there, which makes this a very, very stiff corner bracket. And these actually have the little tips on them, or guides or tabs, if you will. And these tabs are the same size, or very close to the same size, as a channel in this 40 series profile. So what that means is these are kind of like location tabs that keep them from rotating, anti-rotation tabs, what do you want to call them. And they just fit right there in the channel. You can see, I'll show you a shot of it there. So they fit there in the channel, and it keeps it from, you can see I can move it a little bit here. It's got a little bit of lash in it or play, but yeah, it doesn't move very far. And this just enhances the structural integrity of the entire assembly of your cockpit once you have it done. Very nice. I like these tabs. Now, sometimes we can't use these tabs. A typical way that I'll use this bracket is you'll have a piece going like this, and then another piece coming in, and we're forming a 90-degree angle. Okay? So we'll put the bracket in one place like this, and we'll have our T-nut in there, our bolt obviously holding it, and then we'll put the other piece, and because these, see how these grooves are going to line up? The tabs on here will also fit in this piece, so I'll just put it up here. So then we go ahead and cinch it down, and there we have a nice 90-degree angle. And what's cool about the profile when you build it is because of all these brackets are square that we're using, when you pull them tight, if you pull them together like you should, then you have a nice square assembly when you're done, right? So that's another bonus of using this kind of construction material. And yeah, if I have a piece coming in like this though, right, and I'm trying to attach it, let's see, get a light on there. Okay, so you see the groove there, and then we have a groove going the other or perpendicular to that. Then we have to take one side of these tabs on your bracket and pop them off. And I might have to do that, and when I get to that point, I'll show you doing that. But it's very simple. You just put a screwdriver or something stiff in there, and you can actually pry against this tab, right? And it would just snap right off. And usually they snap off perfectly level so they don't drag anywhere, or they don't press up against anything and scratch anything. And I would just pop both of those off. Then I could come in and do the assembly like I want to with this. One of this, you know, it doesn't matter which one. Well, it had to be this one actually in this particular example. So the grooves would fit in that piece, but in here, obviously, they're going this way, so they're not going to fit in the groove on this piece. So that's why I knocked them off, but it still would allow my bracket to mount flush with this piece of profile. So that's an instance where you'd have to take them off, right? So that's two of the basic things that, you know, that you'll have to do for assembly. Chances are most of the time when we do these, we'll have channels on both sides and they'll line up nice. We won't have to break them off. Right. So let's talk about the bolts that come with this. We've got an M8 bolts. They're socket head cap units. This is a 6mm hex size on it, but it's an M8 1.25 pitch on these. All stainless steel units, and we will get a couple of different sizes. These are all the same here. I was looking for a different size one. I'm sure they're in there somewhere, but couldn't find it. But I was able to find them in the black bolts. Now, we got the black bolts in two different configurations. We've got the M8s, and they're both M8 threads, by the way. We have an M8 socket head cap, like this, just like this, the stainless steel one over there. And we have what is known as a flathead. So these flatheads, now all these black hardware bits are going to be used when we use these custom brackets during our assembly. And of course, we want this tapered or flathead unit. You can see how they have counter bores in these brackets. So when they go in, they fit in there like that and they're out of the way. Nice and flush. And actually, they're lower than flush. So they're actually recessed a little bit in there. And once we get to attaching this is actually for the shifter assembly. Once we get to that, we'll go into more detail, obviously, as I'm assembling it. So this is, the black pieces are going to be used for the black brackets. And because they're still going to be exposed, so it's kind of a aesthetic, if you will. So if you have, you know, silver ones sitting in there, yeah, it wouldn't be quite as good, and even though this is not a flathead, but you could see the contrast it would be there. So again, it's more of aesthetic than anything else, but in some instances when we're using this will be a hidden screw head once we get it assembled. So that's another reason why it's a flat head and will sit down in that counter bore. So anything else we want to talk about here? This is a basic. Now, here's one thing. Let me show you how this T-nut actually works. Now, these are great, again, because you don't have to put these in the end and slide them down to where you want them to be to attach something, which can be a real headache if you've already got something attached onto a piece of profile, right? Let me use a shorter piece here. So yeah, it can be a real headache trying to take everything off just so you can put something else on. And this is where these T-nuts with the spring balls are invaluable. They're just really super. So how I typically put these in, depending on where gravity is pulling this nut, I don't usually, if it's gravity's pulling down like this way, I won't insert it like this. I'll insert the bottom edge first. All right. Oops. As you can see it there. So I'll just kind of let it roll in like that, and you're going to have to put a little pressure on it and push this spring ball past the lip here, and it just kind of pops in. So there we go. Now we're popped in. So I can get it in the general area I want to, but I don't have to be specifically perfect, because now I'm just going to set it, and it's still movable once I set it in. So you can't just leave it like this. Obviously, it's off angle. There's no way we're going to get our bolt in there. So I usually take 2 fingers and just take the fingernails, and remember the groove. Actually, let me show you this again. These actually have grooves in them on the top. See that groove there? And that groove is the same size as the channel here. So it kind of helps locate this once you have it in there. And that's what I'm going to do. I'm actually going to center it and locate it, and it'll stay there because of those grooves, right? So what I'll do is take my fingernails and grab the bottom of that groove, and what I'm going to do is kind of a roll-in motion. I'm just going to kind of push it on down and in at the same time. And that puts pressure on that spring ball and allows this lip right here to go past the black lip of the profile. So the nut lip goes by, and then it'll set. So I'm going to do that. I'm just going to press down and in at the same time, and it kind of just, you can see I can push it in that way. See that? And now I'm just going to kind of walk it up with my fingernails. So you hear that pop. You hear that? So now we're centered in the channel. And still, I can move this around without any issues. So we have it in, and that's really half the battle. So now, of course, we can come in with our corner bracket and set it in here, and you can see the hole in there, right? Now, one thing I wanted to mention here, and this is just an aesthetic thing, it's just something that I'm a little anal about, is the orientation of this T-nut itself. You can see we have a longer piece away from the bolt. What I'll typically do here is make sure that that long piece is going towards the back end of my corner bracket. All right. So once it's in there like this, you can see that if I have to put the bolt all the way out in the groove, you still don't see the nut sticking out, right? The nut will be covered by the bracket itself. Now, if I did it the other way, we'll flip it around, and I had the nut all the way to the outside, then you can see there, yeah. And the reason the nut would be, or rather not the nut, the bolt head would go in towards the outside is because you want room in between both of these slots here to be able to get your wrench in there. If you stack them too close, one's going to be in the way of the other of tightening down your wrench. So you can avoid that by doing this, by sliding that out and giving yourself more room on both of the actual socket head cap bolts or whatever bolt you're using. But you can see how that's sticking out. And again, this is an aesthetics thing. It doesn't really affect the integrity of the holding power or anything like that. It's just I think it looks a little better when you do it this way. And yeah, that way it's all covered up, and it's kind of a cleaner look when your job is finished. You're probably going to look at it and say, yeah, I'm glad I did it that way instead of having a bunch of them sitting out, you know, like that. All right, so now let's talk about getting the T-nut out. And easy enough, you put your fingers in again, and I'm just going to press, roll, and do the same motion, and my fingernails are going to catch the top of that little groove in that T-nut, and I'm just going to press down on it and then kind of let pressure off and pull it towards me with my fingernails. And that just popped it loose. All right, easy way to get it popped loose. Now, the only problem with these things are, now that it's loose, it's not the easiest thing to get out of the channel, right? You got to roll it towards you, and yeah, it's kind of finicky, and yeah. So alleviate all your problems with one of these. Now, this is just a pick tool. There's all kinds of different orientations of these things. This just has a very sharp end on it for getting into things or, you know, moving things around in little teeny areas. And I use this to get my T-nuts out. And it's a very simple thing. You go into where the bolt hole is or the threads are, and I just grab the lip of it there and kind of rotate it, right? So what'll happen is, I can get you a shot of that here. It'll kind of rotate out. And I don't put it all the way in, obviously, because then the tip would be stuck on the lip there as I try to rotate it out. So I'm just putting the tip of it in, just barely. And you can see it just kind of rotates out. And now my tip has cleared the channel. I can push it further up, and then it's just a matter of pulling it out. There you go. Very, very easy to do it with a little tool like this. So if you work a lot with aluminum profile, and obviously you're going to be working a lot with these T-nuts if you're doing that, this will save you a lot of anger and cuss words trying to get one of these out. So that's how it works. So that was just again, this is just a simple introduction to how this hardware works, and it's not obvious, it's when you first look at this, how you're going to be using them. And I know people still actually push them in from the ends, but yeah, sliding them in and out. My goodness, that's just such a valuable feature in the construction process. Right, so, and of course, in this kit, we're going to have lots of bolts and, this is a front mount pack. It's very well done as far as each assembly has its own label here. So my front mount, which is this is the big bag of a ton of the stuff. The front mount is this, and to attach the side brackets to the front mount, they've actually went ahead and put it all in a nice neat bag right here. So all my hardware is there. Very cool. I like it when they do that. We also have got the Fanatic Podium wheelbase mount, and all the hardware for that one is there. So it's, like I said, this kit is very well done. And I know some people say, well, why get a kit? I should, or could just go ahead and buy all this stuff and build it myself. And that's very true. But yeah, having a kit means you don't buy a lot more hardware than you need, which you typically will do if you're building your own. And all this stuff will just be here for you, and you won't have to run out to the hardware store and get another bolt, if obviously the kit provides you with everything that you do need. Right, so what we're going to do now is start assembling the rig, and yeah, we'll just get to that segment next. Now we're going to start building the chassis, and of course we're going to be wanting to use the base pieces to assemble first, and once we have those assembled, then we can add on as we go. Now, the P1-X are massive feeling cockpits when you're sitting in it. They feel like you're sitting on a boulder, just no movement at all. And one of the reasons is, first off, it's a profile and it's bolted together properly. But these are pretty massive pieces that we're using here for the bottom frame. This is what we call a 40 by 160 profile. And you can see it's like having 4 40mm profiles stacked together. All right. and all the grooves are the same if it was a 40-40 profile here. Now, this is a heavy piece. It comes in at 16, yeah. It's 16.4 pounds for this thing. So it's a very substantial piece of metal here. And of course, 16.4 pounds translates to making a bunch of scraping noises here with my fingers, translates to 7.4 kilos. So again, a massive piece of profile here. And we're going to be connecting these pieces in between. I call these the spreader pieces because they're going to determine the width of our cockpit. Now this is 500 millimeters wide. And again, it's a 40 by 160. Now this piece is a lot lighter. It comes in at 5.7 pounds or 2.6 kilos. Right. So this is 500 millimeters long. This is 40 millimeters wide. It's going to be sitting like this once we get it assembled. All right. So these spreaders are determining the width of our chassis plus the width of this piece down here, which is 40 millimeters. We have two of them on each side, or one on each side rather, makes two. And that gives us 580 millimeters for the total width of a P1-X chassis. All right. Simple enough, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to use some corner brackets for this to assemble this. And we already saw the hardware in the hardware section that I started this review with. So what we're going to use is these gusseted corner brackets. And we're going to be putting one of these on the top channel and one on the bottom channel. And we'll see this more closely once we actually get it on there. I'll flip them around so you can see better what's going on. And remember, the tabs in here are locking in the channels, so you can't wiggle around. Again, very nice feature of these brackets. And we're going to set this right here, not right here in this position, but it's going to sit right there, and you can see that these channels are going to line up, and the tabs are going to fit in those channels, and we're going to draw that together, and it's going to be nice and tight, right? Pretty simple. So what we'll do next is we'll go over to the floor where we're going to build this thing, and yeah, start putting it together. I have the bottom pieces of profile, these 160 by 40 sections, configured and set up pretty much where I want them to be. Now, there is a requirement for getting the proper spacing between this rear short piece or spreader piece and the front one, as far as this way. And the easiest way to get this right, it should be 500 millimeters in the actual space in between them, because we have two of these 580 millimeter profiles that are actually going to be our seat rails. And all we have to do is set those on top once you have it mocked up, sitting here like this. And I'll bring this one over here and set it over here. And this is where we're going to put our seat bracket so that our seat will actually be able to attach it to our chassis. So I can feel on both ends that I'm pretty flush here, and I'm looking straight down on top to make sure it looks straight, or as straight as it can be, because it's really going to straighten up once we get our corner brackets in. And I can see that now this is located in the proper position. Right, so once that's done, we just get these out of the way. And now we're ready to start installing our corner brackets. And I'm just going to do this side because we're going to do the same thing on the other side, and really no need to see it done twice. So what we're going to do first is put in these spring ball T-nuts, right? And I'm going to start down here on the bottom channel of this one because you're not going to be able to see it as well there. And again, I'm considering what my orientation of my corner bracket is. Remember, I want, if you saw the hardware part, what I want is a little bit of this T-nut exposure showing rather in my channel once I have everything bolted up. And if I turn this long piece towards the back of this corner bracket on both sides, then I don't have it sticking out when my bolt's in there like that. We don't want it sticking out. So I'm going to make sure, and sometimes I forget and I get it wrong, and then I have to go back and take it back apart. But I'm trying to pay attention this time. Right. So again, easy enough. I always start with the bottom part goes into the bottom part of the channel. And then I'll just go ahead and press it in like you saw before in the hardware bits. And then I'm going to take my fingernails, 2 fingernails, and kind of press that in and get it to get in the channel where it's supposed to be. So that's located, and I always push them out a little bit because I'll end up tapping them in a little once I get the corner bracket where I want it. And then we'll go ahead and slide it in and then put the bolt in. I found that's probably the easiest way for me to do it. And I'm going to go ahead and put one on this side also because I'm already here.
So we'll put the bottom in first. Well, you guys can see this, but same procedure for all of it. And once you've done this a few times, it really becomes pretty easy. It's not that hard. And I'll go ahead and put one on the top. Remember, we're going to put a bracket on the bottom, and we're going to put one on the top here. And then, of course, we'll tighten it all down later. So let's go ahead and put this one in. And again, sometimes you can use your thumb to do it, but 2 fingers really works the best because you can kind of shove it around with each finger, rotating back and forth to get it in locked in the channel where we want it to be. And yeah, this goes pretty quick. Just kind of keep paying attention to what my orientation is as far as where that piece is going to be pointing. There we go. You can see this actually goes pretty easy. And these T-nuts are just awesome. To be able to just slide them in like this, or just pop them in rather, is really a treat than having to take everything apart all the time every time we want to put something new on our rig. Put this one in. And they go pretty quick. Like I say, I've been doing this, as you guys probably know if you've been watching any of my videos, for a long time. And it usually goes pretty easy for me. But you know, you never can tell with these things. Some of these T-nuts might be a little bit different as far as the tolerances in the manufacturing, and they might create a little issue when you're trying to put them in. But these look like they seem to be going in pretty well. Not too much drama, if you will. We got one more up here, and we are going to be done. So you can see how fast this can actually go as far as assembly. In fact, I could get this done pretty quick if I wasn't shooting video. All right, so there we have it, and I have them, like I said before, I have it pushed out. Got a little dirt on it here. And now it's a simple matter of coming in with a corner bracket, all right? And I'm just going to set the corner bracket right here, and then I usually take my wrench. Now this is a 6mm ball head driver wrench, and I use this all the time for snugging things up. And all I'm going to do is I usually take this and push it, that T-nut in to where I can see it needs to be, and that's where it is. I don't know how well this is showing up, but now I should be able to put my bolt in, no drama, and there it is. Now I can do the same thing to the other side, push it in to where I think it needs to be to catch the bolt, and put it in with my finger. And once it's in with my finger tight, I'm going to get all of these the same way, right? Just get them finger tight, and then I'll come back and tighten them in a rotating pattern to pull everything in. And these being 90-degree brackets, we should have a perfect square once we're done, and we'll check on that once we're finished. So I'm going to go ahead and speed the rest of this up. All right, so we have them assembled now, as far as very loosely, obviously. So I want to, when I start tightening this up, and I'm going to push, the first thing I'm going to do is take these. If you can see these bolt heads, they're just a little bit in as far as towards the end of the profile. And this is, again, you'll see why, again, while we do this, the T-nuts that way, and put them in the right direction, because now I can push this or pull it, that bolt, get it down a little bit. See, I can pull it to the front of this bracket. See how it went to the front? See how this one's kind of, you can move them back and forth actually. I can take this and move this one back and forth. See if you guys can see that. Usually it helps if you're got it snugged up a little bit, and then I can move it into the slot forward. Like that. And this keeps the separation of your bolt heads where you need them to be, so you have good access to each one of them as you're snugging things up. And I'm just going to, again, lightly snug this up, keep it loose, and we don't want to tighten things up yet. And again, spreading it out as I'm doing that, because these things will pull in different directions as we're tightening them up. All right? And again, block this thing here for you guys. Leave it a little loose. Do this one over here. So if I rotate between the bolt heads here, I'm actually sliding this bracket this way, and then I'm sliding it the other way. So I'm pulling it together evenly. if I do that properly, it's going to give me a perfect square in here, because these are 90-degree brackets and they're kind of self-aligning. But you do have to rotate between these bolt heads to make that happen, because one will pull in too far and you'll be off the other profile if you don't pull them in a rotating pattern. So I slowly pull it in a rotating pattern like that, and that's going to get me where I need to be. In fact, I can see it moving over there to bring it into a 90 degree. Right, so we've got this one sorted, and we're not going to tighten this side up, obviously, because we want to wait until we get our 4 brackets on the other side, and then I'll slowly tighten everything up, making sure that all my profiles are flush where they need to be. And again, if we tighten them properly, we should have a perfectly square box here when we're done. So when we come back, I'll have the other side done. I'll have everything tightened up, and we'll take a look at we'll take a look at it and see what it looks like at that point. Now we have all the brackets attached, and I've cinched them down tightly. And on this part of the frame, I usually do torque a little bit more than I normally do for just like attaching a shifter or something, because this is the base, and this is going to take the stresses of daily use, and especially because I'm going to be using some actuators on this frame, D-box or otherwise. And so I like to cinch them down extra tight. Now, as you can see, all of them are attached now, and we should have a nice square box if I did what I was supposed to do as far as rotating as I cinch this down while maintaining my spacing at the same time. Now, an easy way to see if you have a square box when you're building something is to measure the diagonals this way and this way. And if they match, you know you have a square, at least from the edges of these corner brackets. Now, we might be a millimeter or two off as far as the brackets being true, but maybe the profile might be a little bit short on one side or the other if you measure that also. But typically, you'll be pretty close. And a millimeter, yeah, it's not going to make a whole lot of difference. But anyway, so I'll bump this up against that corner brackets face there, and then I'll look straight down on the tape measure over here, and I can see I have 650, looks like almost 657. Let me make sure I keep this straight and put good tension on it. Yeah, we'll call it 600 and, well, actually 52, not 57. I'm not past the 5 yet. Okay, so 652. Now we'll go over here and do the same thing. And I'm looking down on that, and that's dead on 651. All right, so 652 this way, 651 that way. I'm a millimeter out of square, which for this purpose is acceptable to me anyway. It's going to be really difficult to get that 1 millimeter, bought in. And again, it could be the tolerances of the actual brackets themselves in their manufacturing process. So I'm not going to worry about it too much. I'll also measure the distance on each side here just to see how we're doing there. And it looks like we have 501 millimeters there. Try to keep it straight as I can. Yeah, 501. And then I'll look over here, and here I have 503. So I'm 2 millimeters out as far as coming this way from over there. Again, 2 millimeters is not going to make or break anything here. This is going to be okay. But and again, this is the cool thing about profile. You can get things pretty square just by tightening these up and bumping the profile as you're doing that, trying to keep things straight. So I'm probably just going to leave that there because it's not going to affect anything as far as sitting the rails on top of this, and we'll get to that in another segment. So I also want to introduce you to these caps here that are included in your kit, and they go onto these corner brackets like this. They have some tabs on them, and the corner brackets have a groove on the bottom and on the top internally that accepts these tabs that are on here. Easy enough, it's not a big deal. And you just press that in, and sometimes they won't go all the way in just by pressing them. And I'll take my soft nylon mallet here as a dual head thing and just kind of tap it, and there it goes. Now, to be honest, typically I don't use these covers in an internal situation like this because no one's really going to see it. Once the bars are on here for the seat and you have your seat on, all you're going to see is the top of the metal pieces here, which this doesn't cover anyway. Of course, you can do it any way you want to. That's the beauty of building your own rig. So, like I said before, I typically don't use these. So, that's all accomplished. Now we have a nice solid frame. Of course, it's going to be more solid once we attach our seat rails and get our pedal tray actually bolted in too, because as we add this, it improves the structural integrity of the whole unit, of course, as you might imagine. So yeah, we'll get to the next segment. Now we're ready to put the seat rails on, and of course we'll be putting a seat bracket on top of this rail to hold our seat, depending on which seat that you're going to be using. Now I've already set our T-nuts in, our M8 T-nuts, and these corner brackets here, I've already removed one side. Remember, now we're actually crossing, put this back in there, we're actually crossing these two profiles. So I have a channel going this way, and I have a channel running perpendicular the other way. So if you watch the hardware part of the review, the tabs on these corners brackets here, you can see I still have my tabs there, right? But I've taken the tabs off the other side so it sits flush with the profile. And here's a quick little shot here of me showing you the screwdriver I used to remove those tabs. So once we remove the tabs, obviously we can land it flat and flush the way we need it to, and we still have these tabs here to fit in the channel, like that. So all we have to do is line this up. And remember, I'm going to leave this loose. I'm not going to cinch it down tight yet because I have no idea how wide I'm going to need both of these to be to accommodate the seat brackets that I'll be using. So we just go ahead and run these M8s in like this. This is really one of the easiest things to do because it's sitting on top and you don't have to hold anything, and you don't have to get at a weird angle trying to find out where the hole is for your bolt, rather. And I did the same thing to this piece of profile here. So we'll just mount that on the other side like this. Again, very simple stuff. And if you've been assembling your unit so far, then if you've gotten this far with it, then you're probably already getting used to doing these things as far as moving this stuff around. Now I had to loosen this one a little bit so I could get the hole lined up. And again, that's why we leave it kind of loose, because once I'm done with this, what I'm going to do is line up the profiles and make sure they're flush, and then just give a short little tighten on this. I'm not going to tighten it down, like I said. It's kind of like just holding it in place. And again, I like to slide my screws all the way out in the bracket before I tighten it down. Right, and I'm just going to snug it up enough to keep it from moving around. Now remember, these two pieces here add structural integrity to the whole chassis. And as I said before, as we add other pieces to this that cross connect, then again, it adds more rigidity, if you will, to the whole assembly. And that's the cool thing about this stuff. Oh, there's so many cool things, isn't there? But again, easy enough to slide this back and forth. Well, that's loose so I can slide it. Actually, it's too tight, or rather too loose, because it's jiggling around. You have to have it down a little bit to get it to do this smoothly, like this. So we can slide this around. Again, I usually put upward pressure when I'm sliding this stuff around, trying to keep from scratching up my beautiful black anodized profiles here. Right, simple enough. That was a quick one, right? And yeah, we're going to move on to the next segment. Now we're going to put the feet. These are the OEM or stock feet that comes with the P1-X cockpit. There are some accessory feet that are available. I'm going to show you a shot of that here. I actually did a review of those in the P1 upgrade video that I did. So you might want to check that out and get a better understanding how those work. Now, what we get with the, again, stock setup is these guys. And they're a rubber foot that has a metal insert in it to capture the bolt when we fasten it down. And you can see on the other side it's also rubber, so it sticks to the bottom of this rail pretty well, right? And we have another stainless steel spring ball T-nut, right? And this one actually is threaded for a 6mm screw. So we can put a 6mm bolt in here, which I'm going to show you that right here, to affix it with. Now I've already got some of these made up, and this is what it looks like when we're done. Have the bolt in there, and this is a 5mm head on this, right? So that's what we're going to use to tighten it down with. So it's just a matter of sliding, just like nothing really different here. It's just like normal. We'll slide this in And I'll show you me doing that on the top one here on the back. And I don't know where I'm going to actually end up with this foot, but yeah, it really doesn't matter. And then it's just, we just tighten it down with our 5mm wrench, which I have up here. So we'll go ahead and just snug that up. And you don't have to tighten these down a lot. You just need to snug it up a bit. Yeah, it's not going anywhere. So we'll go ahead and put the other 3 feet on. This is probably going to be the shortest segment of this entire build. So we'll take a look at that when we get back. Right, so we've got the feet on now, and it's a very sticky foot, especially on the cardboard here. It might be a little less sticky on my concrete. And I'm going to leave this on the cardboard in case I drop something. I don't want to scratch it up. And I could just go ahead and take the cardboard off now, but just for a safety measure, I'll leave it on there. But yeah, these feet do a great job. I mean, if it's going to be a static rig, these feet, I think, are all you need. Even though, like I mentioned in the other part of this segment, that there are some accessory feet that you can get that widen the footprint out. But yeah, I think if you're just going to have this cockpit sitting static without any, future motion going on or anything, these feet will probably do the job. Unless, of course, you need the rig for some reason to be higher up, then the other accessory feet would be nice to have. Right, so I've called this done, and so the feet are installed, and I think we'll probably get to the pedal tray next. So let's take a look at what we're going to be using to assemble our pedal tray. First thing you'll notice is these massive side plates to support the pedal tray. These are 15mm thick, and they're rather hefty. So it gives you the sense that this is going to be a very stiff pedal tray mount, and it will never move as long as you have it cinched down properly. Now on one side, we've got some beveled pieces here. We've got the slot here. We've got holes here, here, and up here that are countersunked, or these are beveled, and I'd call these countersunked. So, of course, that's so we can use these guys, these flathead screws, or bolts, and these are M8s, and they'll fit in these holes like this and lay flat, so that when we have this inside of the profile and we're moving it around, we don't have, obviously, bolt heads sticking out and causing problems. And this, we'll also be using this in the slot if you choose to use the slot. And they'll also fit in there, as you can see, and we'll tighten down whatever profile we put in there. And now it allows us to move the profile. And that's how I'm going to be doing it. There's several ways to do this. The only main piece that has to be done one way is this piece here. Well, you can actually do this 2 ways also. This 40-160 piece, of course, is the major piece. And 2 of these holes on the sides here, you can see they've actually been tapped and threaded. And of course, that's on the other side too. So there's 2 ways to mount this. These spaced holes here will fit these holes in the front. So I can actually get this thing up here, mount it statically right here, because these holes will line up to the front part. Or I could turn it around and do something like this, because the holes will still make it into that beveled section. So I can, this is very universal. I don't say universal. It's a very adjustable unit. You can put these plates this way, run it this way, like let's say the driver's over here. That's how I'm going to have it. Or you could flip it around and run it this way, where you can put the big plate still in the front and use the bevel slots there, and use the other plate. Well, let's see, we could put it here, and then we can use the other plate as a step down plate, or a heel plate if you will. Let's say we have the top profile up here, sitting here, right, the big fat one. Then we can actually put this one on these holes lower and have kind of like a heel plate there if you wanted to, or however you want to do it. And these holes here in this 40-80 profile are actually have 40mm centers on them, and the plates themselves have 2 sets of the same thing. I actually have my caliper set to the 40mm centers because I already measured it, and yeah, you can see we're at 40mm centers here and on this lower set down here, right? So again, there's a few different ways you can do this. There's no set way to do it. I'm just going to do it the way I'm going to do it, and yeah, you guys can do whatever you want. Now, it's also neat that this kit comes with its own little baggie of parts, and we have the usual suspects here of roll-in T-nuts and a lot of black hardware. Because these are black plates, yeah, that's why we're going to have all this black hardware. And it's got a little tag on it there showing it's for the pedal tray. And we've got some bolts that are, let's see how long these puppies are. I believe these are 35s. They look pretty long. Let's see what we got. 25s. Yeah. So these are 25 mil. And we've also got these flat heads. And remember, I just had one out here, but that wasn't from this kit. So I put that out of the way over there. It's not to mix it up because it's probably going to be too short. But this flat head, it looks like to be, yeah, that's a 20 millimeter right there. So we've got our flat heads. We've got our sockets, cap socket heads. And of course, all these are M8s. And we have all our T-nuts. Now they also include some washers and also some M6. Actually, that's M5. We got M6 and M5. Okay. So we've got M6 and M5 bolts and T-nuts also. So if you want to fix your pedals directly to the tray, once we have it assembled, then they give you a way to do that, which is nice that they include that in the kit. A lot of times you'll just get the assembly to make this a tray or something, and you won't get the little bits to actually attach something. And that's really nice that they included that, because again, this is all stainless steel hardware, and these spring ball roll-in T-nuts are not cheap, but they work so well. So we also have some 5 millimeter black ones, socket head cap screws. And I'm not sure, let's see if we got a 5 mil. Yeah, we certainly do. We actually have a 5 millimeter spring ball T-nuts in there, again, for attaching things. Now, if you use the 6 and don't use the 5, that gives you an extra set of 5s to attach a shifter or something, or whatever you want to do. But the neat thing is we've got plenty of these spring ball T-nuts to do what we need to do. Great kit. You don't have to go out, stop what you're doing, and go out and shop around for something else. Right. So what we're going to do, this is the way I did this. I did this pedal tray review already in the P1-X upgrade video that I did. So what I'm going to do is go over and set this up on the rig. I'm going to go ahead and tape it again. Just go ahead and include it in this video and show me attaching it, because it's to the clean chassis this time instead of one that's already has stuff on it. And the best way I found to do this, and I'm going to be putting it in this way with this end supporting the 40 by 160, and then I'll have the 4080 in this piece, so I can slide it around and adjust it. And of course, again, that's not set in stone. You can do it any way you want to. The important part here, again, we're going to have to attach 2 M8s in each one of these slots, so that makes 4 times 2 is 8, and that's how we're going to be adjusting it back and forth and up and down. And I'm going to attach these plates first and get them in a position that are close to each other, and then I'm going to bring in, and leave them loose, of course, and then I'm going to bring in these profiles and attach them on the sides. At least that's what I plan on doing. So we'll go ahead and take everything over there. I'm going to go ahead and attach these side plates, and then we'll go from there. I have the side plates mounted now, and I just wanted to give you guys a little bit of a closer look here. Not a big deal, obviously. We're just mounting 4 bolts on each side, and I actually put these in the top 2 channels so I can get the maximum height adjustment that these plates can give me. So yeah, just did that on both sides, and we'll go over here to this side and take a look. And also another pointer when you're setting this up, if you see down here, I've actually got the edges of these brackets flush with this piece of profile on both sides. So this makes it sure, or will make sure, that my bolt holes up here, when I go to put my profiles in, that we'll see in the next bit of this segment, will all be lined up as far as across each other here, right? So all this will be lined up, and I shouldn't have any problems getting the bolts in, other than me not being able to do it myself. So yeah, let's move on to putting the cross or spreader profiles on. So we're going to start out with the 40-160 piece of profile. And the easiest way to do this, I've found, and this is a tight fit in between these plates. And you want a tight fit. You don't want it loose and then having to pull against these bolts to tighten this together. But it can be very snug. And what I use is a technique of where I'll kind of put it in there, and I'll take the sides of my hands, the edges here, and press against the brackets as I'm trying to get it in. And this will put tension on the brackets and spread them out as far as I can get them to hopefully slide this down in here. So without further ado, let's see how this works. Again, I'm kind of get down here with the sides of my hands. There we go. And sliding in there. It's very tight, which is, in my eyes, very good. I don't want a loose fit, that's for sure. And now all I have to do is get down here, and hopefully my head doesn't get in the way too much. locate the hole and see if I can get a bolt started. Looks like that's going in. There we go. So let's see if we can get the back one in. Again, this is very tight, all of this. So, yeah. And this is, by the way, a 5mm hex head, and that's what I'm using, a 5mm driver here. Alright, so I'm just going to kind of snug this. I'm not even going to snug it down. I'm going to leave it loose because I don't want to bind anything up while I'm trying to get the other side in. Now, you're not going to see this. Hopefully it goes quick enough that it doesn't really matter. So I'm going to have to put some pressure on this one because of the way, well, let's see. Let me see if I can, my bracket should slide a little bit. And it is sliding. Again, this can be pretty finicky. Everything wiggling around on you. And just trying to get that hole lined up. I don't know if I'm far enough out yet. Try this. There, I think we're gonna get it there. Yeah. And it helps to jiggle a little bit. Just take your hand and wiggle things. So that one started, so that means this one, if all the machining was done properly, should go ahead and start without too much issue. There it goes. So we'll go ahead and run these in. Again, I don't want to tighten it all the way up until I get the back piece in, because obviously it's going to be very hard to get the back piece in if I've tightened up both of these brackets here. So now all we got to do is get the back piece in. And this again is the 4080, and again tapped and threaded on each end. Make sure you have that or it's not going to work very well. All right, let's see how this one goes in. Actually, because we got the other piece in there spreading it out already, this should go in pretty good, I think. I thought, was thinking, and yet it is going a lot easier. So then we just do the same thing. We're going to bend over, try to find that hole and get it centered to where I can get the bolt in it. Okay, there's one. I'm going to go ahead and lift this other side up and get it started too. Again, shaking these things around a little bit can help get these bolts started. And if one hole doesn't start well for you, you can always try another one. And usually if you can get it in the other one, it'll help you pull it together where you need it. So this one's being a little finicky on this side. So we'll get her though. I can get it lined up here. Here we go. Go ahead and put this one in. Like I said, once you get one in, it's easier to get the others in. Plus these slots that I'm putting this in are kind of tight. Try with this hand. So you don't have much wiggle room here to get these things started. But we'll get it done, as promised. Again, it's easier to do this when you're not shooting video. Alright. This one's really giving me a time here. There we go. At least it started. And we'll go ahead and get the other one started. Got one more to go. Got it done. Alright. So there they are. Now it's just a matter of tightening everything up and we'll have this done. Now remember, I can still move this back and forward, or back and forth rather, because of the slots here. We can still raise the whole thing up. See if I can get it to do that. Make sure I didn't tighten up any of these bolts under here too much. There we go. So yeah, I can get a lot of, you can see I can get a lot of vertical movement here, which is great. The more the merrier as far as I'm concerned, because to get a correct seating position, a lot of times you need a lot of room in the vertical. Instead of building some profiles on top of this and then mounting your pedals to get that level you need, this will probably get you there, I think. Right, so there it is. The pedal tray is assembled, and now we can move on to, I guess we'll do the wheelbase supports and mount next. These are the profiles that we'll be using for our wheelbase mount. And of course, these are the upright sections. Now, these are 780 millimeters in length, and they're 340s, so we call this a 40 by 120, or a 40-120. And yeah, it's just pieces of profile, nothing special here, no holes drilled in the ends because we don't need that. And what we're going to use to attach these to the frame are these plates here. And you'll notice that these plates have 4 counterbore holes in the middle. And if we flip it around, we can see that we have some more counterbore holes over here in the perimeter of this plate. It's a little scratched up because I've been messing around with stuff. And yeah, so what I usually want to do here is these 4 inside holes are going to fit into 2 outside channels of this profile. So I can turn this around a little so you can get a better look at that. So you can see they line right up, right? So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go ahead and put some T-nuts in here. And I'm just sliding them in like this because, well, it's easy to do when it's laying flat. And again, I'm kind of paying attention to which way I'm orienting these little T-nuts here, right? So I don't want them sticking out the edge where you can see them, even though this is really going to be a blind side, and you're not ever going to see it because it's going to be cinched up tight onto the sides of the base profile of the base frame that we've already built. So I kind of get that in the general area, and then I'll get my flathead screws or bolts. These are M8s, of course, just like everything else. Now this is a 5mm on the top here, so I'm going to need my 5mm driver to get this attached. And it's pretty simple. You just kind of look straight down here and find out where your hole is. And I usually use this to help me out a little. So leave it loose. Obviously we don't want to tighten it up yet. And then I can slide this back and forth at will to line up the other holes. And then that was the easy one to find there. And then I'll get the other 2. Yeah, that's pretty easy. When it's laying on the bench, you can prefab this or pre-assemble it, and then we'll walk over and attach them to the sides of our profile itself. Now, I'm going to take this, let me move this down a bit, and move this bracket all the way to the end so it's sitting flush. All right, so this is going to give me, when I mount it to the side of the base profiles with these holes here, these 4 holes on the perimeter, this is going to give me the maximum height for this wheel mount, or the wheel base mount. And that's what I want to start with. If there's a reason I need to lower this, then it's simple enough. Well, actually, it's not that simple, because then I'm going to have to pull the whole thing off and loosen these up and then slide it back and forth again. And then tighten them back down, then put the whole thing back on. Not that big of a deal, really, but yeah, I usually start with the highest or the most material I can use as far as attaching anything when I start. So I'll go ahead and torque these down. And yeah, it doesn't take much because these are flat. They dig in pretty good, these flathead screws. So now, once I have that done, go ahead and do my little circle pattern here. Maybe a little cross. Now we're tightly secured to this profile. And now I'm going to take this profile over to the base where we have the 4160s with 4 of these grooves and mount it that way, flat up against it. So it's going to look like this. And this is our base profile going this way, sitting flush against that profile. So what I'll do is assemble the other one just like I did this one, and we come back, we'll be over on the base of the profile, or of the cockpit rather, we'll be attaching this to the base of the profile and see how all that goes. All right, now it's time to attach our upright for our wheelbase support. Now, I've already put some T-nuts in here, and they're kind of oriented where I want them to be probably, but it's easy enough to move this back and forth when I'm actually attaching it. Now again, we have the bracket all the way at the end of this profile because I want the maximum reach I can get as far as height with this chassis, so that even the tallest people should be able to use my wheelbase, we hope. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get this lined up, and you can kind of sit it on the floor here to get it started, and then I'm just going to lean over and see where my hole is, and I'm going to put the top one in first, or top ones in first. At least that's the idea. And this is where the wrench comes in handy. Once you get it started, you can just kind of put it in there pretty easily. And if I'm not lined up, I can actually push it this way or that way to get things lined up. Very easy to do this. Of course, if you're building your own cockpit, P1-X cockpit rather, then if you come this far, then yeah, you're used to it by now. So you know how to wiggle things around to make them line up. Pull this one a little bit to get this one in. There we go. And one more. Let's see where that one's at. I got to push it towards the back a little bit to get this one. And again, I'm pulling up and taking pressure off of these bolts as I'm putting them in. You want to pull it up and take pressure off every chance you get. All right, so now we can actually pull this back here. And you guys can get a better look on the close-up here. And I'm just going to kind of keep pressure pulling up on this as I'm snugging it up a bit. And that's it. Pretty easy, huh? And of course, I'm not sure where I'm going to want this at this time, but I'm going to slide it back and forth when I get there. And the thing about when you slide this back and forth, you want to loosen these up pretty loose so you can pick up on this part and kind of push outwards as I'm moving it, as I'm sliding along, because I don't want it to dig into the sides here, right? All right, so all we got to do is get the other one attached, and when we come back, we'll have the other one attached, and yeah, see how it's looking. Just want to give you guys a little flyover here now that we have both of these wheelbase uprights mounted. And as you can see, they're kind of, it's hard to tell from this video, obviously, but they are lined up with each other. Of course, I might change this later on, but the next step is to mount the actual wheelbase mount itself in between these two profiles. And once we have that done, then obviously we'll have a much better idea of where we want both of these to be as far as in relation to where I'll be sitting. And I might even have to tweak that once I get the seat done and my pedals in and all that stuff. So yeah, that's something that's just going to be a work in progress. But as you can see, yeah, we've come a long way. We've got the assembly almost done. Once we get this wheelbase mount installed, then we'll just have the shifter mount, and yeah, this build will be over. So we'll get to the wheelbase mount next. Now it's time to get our wheelbase bracket mounted. And there's a couple of wheel brackets available from SimLabs. This is what they call the front mount. And this is good for like any of the SimuCube midge motors that you use with SimuCube, or a lens, or whatever you're using, the Bodner Kollmorgen series. This will fit all of those motors, and they are front mount motors. Now they also make one for the Fanatic direct drive wheel, which is the Podium series, and DD1 or DD2 will fit. I'll show you a shot of that here. I actually did a review on this not too long ago, so you can go back in my videos and find that, and that is a great mount also, very solid mount. When it comes to direct drive motors, they put out a lot of torque, at least most of them do. And it's essential, I think, to have a very, very stiff, solid mount to mount those motors to. Not only because you don't want it moving around when you're using it, but because if it does move around, if there's any flex in your mount, then it acts as a damper. And that damper will mute the force feedback details that are coming from that motor. So it doesn't let you feel everything that that motor is capable of delivering. And when you have a nice stiff mount, you definitely can tell the difference. A good case for that is the Fanatic review. If you look at that, I actually really liked what happened with that. When I mounted that to that solid mount, I had it on the SimLabs flat mount before, which is good. Now that's a good mount too. Not to take anything away from it for its purpose, and that's for like the Logitech, the Thrustmasters, the Fanatec CSL Elite wheelbases, and the Club Sports. That works pretty well for those. No problems there. But when you put a direct drive wheel on that flat plate and have it higher torques, and you start turning the wheel, it actually flexes the plate, will flex back and forth, or up and down rather. Any flex acts as a damper, and that's definitely not what we want, because we don't have G-force when we're sim racing, and we need all the details, at least in my opinion, that we can get to be able to tell what the car is doing and react in good time. So back to these mounts here. This is a very solid mount. I've been running it a long time with my Kollmorgen, and also whenever I was using a midge or the newer SimuCube 2 motors, and it works a treat. Very stiff. You feel everything those motors can put out. And again, like I said before, once I did that Podium mount
review, it really increased what I felt from the in a noticeable amount from the Fanatic direct drive motor, the Outrunner. Now, I'm going to put this together for you and show you how this is assembled. I'm not sure which motor I'm actually going to be running on this once I finally get it up and running, but this is more of a build video than a setup video. And yeah, I've already done a setup video on the P1, so I think I'm not going to do a build video, rather a setup video on this one. But anyway, we also get these side brackets, and these are 10 mil thick. All right, this over here is 15 mil thick, so it's very heavy duty. And these side brackets have countersunk or counterbore holes so that we can put these flathead bolts in them, like that. And when we're moving this, because this is going to be attached to the side of this bracket here, and when this is all attached together, it's going to be mounted against the insides of our wheelbase upright supports. And this is going to keep it out of the way so we can adjust it like we need to, right? Okay, so this bracket is going to fit right in here behind this one. And I'll just lay this one down and give you an example of how this is going to go together. It goes together like this. And we're going to have a corner bracket, which, by the way, is in this nice pack. I'll show you the little front mount parts pack they gave us. And this will fit in here like this. And obviously, we're going to be running our bolts from this side into the corner bracket. Now, of course, we're not going to be using a T-nut in this assembly. Let's turn this around a little. All right, so we're not going to be using a T-nut, but they do give us, it's kind of standing there, I'm sure it's going to fall as soon as I breathe on it, but they give us these M8 nylon safety or lock nuts, if you will. They have the nylon inserts in them so that grabs the threads and keeps it from vibrating loose. So very nicely done. And of course, we'll just put one of those on there. And I'm going to actually show you me doing that in the next segment here, but I just want to show you some of the parts that are going to be involved here. And pretty much that's it. They actually give us these really long M8 bolts. And these can be used to mount your actual motor. Let's go ahead and take this off before it falls off. So these are actually going to be used to go in here like this. So you can mount your servo motor, depending on which one it is, in these grooves here. All right. So all the parts you need to mount your motor are in here. Very cool that he actually went in and put these in here too, because they really didn't have to. A lot of times manufacturers leave you up to your own devices to find the right bolts for your motor. Right. Anything else we want to talk about here? That's pretty much it. It's a very simple assembly. And when I come back, I'm actually just going to assemble one side so that we can see how that goes together and yeah, move on from there. I wanted to show you just a quick look at how these brackets mount, the side brackets mount. It's pretty simple stuff here. We have these flathead screws like we saw before, or bolts, M8s, and this an M5 on the top of that, all right? And it's a simple matter of hanging the brackets on there. Now, remember the brackets all come with these tabs in them. Those little locating tabs that we've been discussing throughout this video so far, and we're going to have to break those off because we want them sitting flush. Now, I've already got a couple of them done that way, and you can see that they're broken off there and they're flat. So they can sit flat against both plates, this one and, of course, the side plate that we're going to mount in a minute. Now, these flathead bolts, there's two different sizes in the kit. One is a 20 millimeter and the other is a 25 millimeter. So we got a little different sizes there. And the reason is we have a 15 millimeter plate here and we have a 10 millimeter plate over here. So we don't need as long a bolt to go through here to do the same thing as far as getting the nuts positioned correctly on the bolts. But these nuts have to go down far enough to engage these nylon bits that are inserted in there. Or you might as well just have a regular nut on there, right? It doesn't do any good. So what I'm going to do is put one of the long ones on the front plate and just kind of hang this bracket here like that. All right? Let's turn it this way a little bit, make you see a little better. And then I'm going to take one of the nuts and just put it on there. Very simple, actually, right? Not a whole lot to see here. And I'm just going to let it hang there for now. And then I'm going to come in and put another long one in on the bottom hole. And I'm going to kind of slide my bracket on there like that. And it's it'll just sit there on your bench as you're doing this or wherever you're doing it at. Then we'll go ahead and put our nut on there until we reach the nylon piece, and then obviously you can't turn it anymore. Now I'm going to leave it loose like this, and then I'm going to come over and put my side plate against it. Let's make sure you get the right one. We want this on the bottom, so our countersunk holes have to be
over on this side to do this. Now, one thing is, actually, I'm going to turn this over this way after second thought. This plate sits on top of the 15 mil plate. So it's flush. These edges should be flush when you're done. Right in here, this should be nice and flush like that. So keeping that in mind, I'm just going to set it there loose, let it stand there for a second right there. And I pushed it back and forth so I can get my holes lined up on the other side. And now I can use my 20 millimeter flathead bolt to go in the other side. I'm going to kind of slide this out a little bit. There's going to be, it's a little bit tricky here, and the reason is we've got two bolts sticking in here, all right? If I tilt this up, it'll let those bolts fall back out a little bit, so I have a little more clearance. And I'm also going to slide this thing out. I'll show you a little better here. I'm sliding it out to the limits of the slots in these brackets, so it gives me more room to get a nut on that. See that bolt sticking through? I need some more room to get this nut on there, so I'm just going to and that's why you have it real loose at first. So I'll go ahead and get that started. Easy enough, really, once you see it done. It is a little fiddly, obviously, but nothing that we can't handle here at the SRG, well, at least most of the time. And yeah, you can pick it up, so you can locate this bolt, threaded bolt, away from this as far as you can on the assembly process. Now, once we have these started, then we're going to have to make sure that this piece here that we're putting on is flush with this seam, or the edge that we have on this big bracket, this 15 millimeter bracket. So the idea is to get it like this. I don't know how straight that's going to be when I show you, but yeah, you guys get the idea here. Because this is going to give it the 500 millimeter width that we need. Actually, it's bigger than 500 millimeters. It's 580 plus 10. It's like 600 millimeters because of the spacers and the way the uprights are sitting on that P1-X frame over there. So now we got everything kind of loosely assembled. It's just a matter of tightening things up. And yeah, you're going to have to mess around with this a little bit. Yeah, you can pull things as it's loose. You can tighten one side and get one side out of the way as you're tightening one, and then go in for the other, which is probably how I'm going to, but we got to end up with it sitting on the bottom here. So what I'm going to do is kind of hang this off the edge. You guys can see this a little right here. Let it sit there for a second. Now I have a 13 mil wrench. Obviously, I'm going to need that for my nuts. Now I also have a socket because I wasn't sure what I was going to need or what I was going to end up doing here. And I have my 5 millimeter Wera wrench. Okay. And I'm just going to start this by, again, finding my flush spot here with it hanging off. Hope you guys can see what I'm doing here. And then I'll see where this bolt is and where it needs to be. And I can see now I'm not going to be able to use a socket on this bolt in here because it's just too far this way, too far that way for me to be able to do it. So it's going to have to be a wrench. And the wrench works fine. It slides right in there. There's enough room in this bracket to do that. Now I just got to find my 5 mil hole here on the bolt. Just like that. There we go. And now I'll just obviously start tightening things up. And I'm trying to get it far enough so I can just spin it around. This is kind of fiddly, as you can imagine. But I just need to snug it up a little bit. I'm not going to get it real tight. I just want to bring it down flat to where it's sitting and not wiggling around too much. But still giving me enough room to make minor adjustments as I'm moving along here. So there we go. That's too tight. I'm going to loosen it up a little bit so I can still move it around a little. There we go. All right. So I can still move this around, and that's what I wanted. Now I'm going to do the same thing to the other one underneath. Again, giving myself enough room here. Actually, I probably should be using my power wrench over there instead of doing it with this hand piece. But most people aren't going to be using a power wrench. And this, again, is just to get things tightened up a little bit so it doesn't move around on me while I'm trying to make my final tune this thing as I tighten it down. Again, it can be a little fiddly, especially when you drop your wrench. That's not constructive or helpful at all. So I hope you guys are enjoying watching this. But you know, when you're assembling things, you know, this is the way it goes. Things can be a little fiddly and not go the way you want them to at first. All right, so now I have the brackets on here, and
that's enough for me to still move this thing around. Show you there. So I can now start tightening up the guys over here. And I am going to, I'm tired of fiddling with that. I'm going to go ahead and use the power machine, because it just makes things a little easier when you're trying to just take up a lot of slack in a bolt. Now I still have enough room to get down inside of here on this nut. And then obviously I'm just going to make some noise here, so bear with me. Okay. And we'll go ahead and get the other one. I don't want to get it too tight, so that's why I stopped. I just want to snug things up here. Now we're getting to the fine-tune part. And that's where we want to make sure that, again, that I'm flush with the edge of this 15mm bracket here. So I'm just going to kind of watch that as I don't know how well you guys are going to be able to see this while I'm doing it, but I'm watching that as I'm going to start tightening down. This is where I'm going to use the manual, because the power one just does it too fast and it'll probably jump around on me, and yeah, it won't end up well. It's much easier to have control when you have one of these on there. So I'll just watch this edge here. I'm kind of pushing it around, watching it, and making sure that I get that thing flush. Again, can be a little fiddly, but what isn't these days, right, when we're building something. All right. Now, also another thing you can do here, a little trick that I do, is get it kind of tight, not real tight, but just kind of tight. If you guys can even figure out what that means. And if it's not too tight, I can take my nylon mallet, if it's not perfectly lined up here with this edge, all right? If it's not perfect, I can feel a little bit proud here on this bracket compared to the edge of this. So I'll take my nylon mallet here, and remember, I haven't finished tightening it down all the way yet, and just give it a little tap until it feels the same all the way down. I think just a little bit more. Yeah, see, that feels right to me. And this is something that you're just going to have to do, you know, trial and error. Now I can go in and really cinch down on this, and the other two bolts over here on the side are not going to matter at this point, because this one will be so tight, they'll just follow it along. I can get it back in there, and there it is. So now I'll go ahead and tighten this up again, watching it. It shouldn't move now. There we go. That's looking pretty good there. I like what I'm seeing. Although, again, I'm kind of blind underneath here when you're reaching for that bolt. There we go. Right. So now this is pretty tight, even though I haven't got these guys on the outside bracket tight yet. You see, they're still wiggling around a little bit. So, but the important thing here is I've now got it flush. Well, you can see that. So it's nice and flush with this edge. So now that wheel upright bracket can come up here and snug up against it when we put our bolts in here to tighten it to the actual uprights, and there won't be any interference there. Nice and clean, you know, with the countersunk holes. Yeah, very nice. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and tighten these other two up before I forget, because I've been known to do that because I'm moving on to something else and I forget, oh yeah, by the way, we don't have these all the way tight yet. And then you find out when you're using your direct drive wheel. There we go. That's feeling pretty good there. A little bit more here. Oh, there we go. Now, we're done. Well, not really done. I got to do the other side, but still, this is what you should end up with. And actually, I'm a little bit, look at that. See that? If you can see that, I'm actually a little bit more of a gap here than I am there. So this thing kind of moved on me when I tightened it up. So this is the kind of stuff you want to look for when you're putting this together. Now, the thing is, I can loosen this up just a little, and then I'll go back with my mallet and make the adjustment. I'm just going to loosen this one because that's where my gap is. So we're going to loosen it just a little there. And then I'm going to take the nylon mallet and just watch the edge here. There it goes. Sweet. All right. And again, this is just part of the process. It's not that complicated. I mean, if I can do it, anybody can do it. So, yeah. Let's go ahead and tighten that back up now. And I'm watching to make sure it doesn't pull back up. I don't think it will. There we go. Now we're good. Yes. So now, see that? We've got a nice straight edge across there. and we're nice and flush with the side. This is what you want when you build these brackets. All right, so yeah, you can see it really didn't take that much effort. It was a little fiddly, but it's even a little more fiddly because I'm shooting video, and yeah, you know how that goes. So there we have it. Now I'm going to go ahead obviously and mount the other one on, and when we come back we'll be putting it on the actual rig uprights. So there's a couple of ways to do this. Obviously you don't have to do it the way I do it, and right now I'm going to show you without a motor mounted. Typically I will mount my servo motor to this bracket before I slip it in, and it's a bit finicky, or fiddly rather, as you might imagine. You're over here, you got the heavy motor in here, and yeah, it's not the easiest thing to do, but I've got a system that I've kind of developed because I do it a lot, as you know, other reviews I do. So you can also not mount it, which I'm going to show you here, and that means you're going to have to mount the servo after you have it mounted to your uprights here. And that presents its own problems because most servos just have a hole in the flange, and you have to insert the bolt, then get the nut on it while you're trying to hold the motor, and you almost need 3 hands to do that. You almost need 3 hands to do this, but it's a little bit, I just found it, for me personally, it's a little bit easier to mount the motor first, unless you have one of the new SimuCube 2 motors, because they're actually, the flanges on those are actually threaded, which is nice because then you can just hold it up there and run the bolts in. But still, you know, you're holding up a heavy motor while you're trying to do that. So I'm going to give you a close up here what I have as far as the arrangement here. I have 3 bolts in here, obviously with 3 T-nuts that are going down the channels. And I will, because this is a 3-channel, it's a 40 by 160 or 120 rather, then I'm going to have this guy in the middle channel. I'll have one down here in the forward channel and one in the back like this. All right, so that's my plan of attack to get these in there. And also, you don't want to put these bolts, because these bolts are kind of short. You know, I actually have some custom bolts, not custom bolts, but other bolts that are longer that I use in my everyday rig, because it's just a little easier for me. But I had to put some washers in to get the spacing correct so it wouldn't bottom out. The bolt doesn't bottom out in the channel, which is very important before you tighten up that T-nut, and then it's worthless using it that way. But you can still use these, but I found that you can see they're not very far in. See how, not very far into the T-nut, maybe 1-2 turns, and that usually gives you enough room to get in the channel, but it's still a little fiddly. And only 1 and 2 turns. If you're messing around with it, sometimes they can flip around a couple times on you on the other side or something, and one falls off, and of course that's ruining your day trying to get this mounted. It can be a little fiddly, but most people, almost 99.9% of you guys who are mounting these, aren't going to be taking them off very often, unlike me. So let's go over here. And another thing to make sure, obviously, something that it should be obvious, but make sure that both of these uprights are the exact same distance from the ends of your cockpit over here, because obviously they need to be even with each other to make this work. I also leave them loose when I'm putting this on. I don't tighten them down. All right, so I got some playroom, if you will. And probably another very important thing is the wrench you're going to use. Make sure it's handy and you can get to it, which actually that my jeans are catching on the rubbery part. So I'm going to do it like this. I usually have it in my front pocket. There we go. So I can get to it while I'm got my hands full and I'm leaning on stuff. So get to it easily to start tightening things up. Right. So without further ado, let's get this done. Now the first, again, I'm using the 2 bottoms here. I'm going to put it in the front and the rear. And then we're going to let the center one right here follow into the center channel. And you have to kind of rotate back and forth and kind of get them pre-located. And I kind of tilt it back to do that so they don't slide around too much on me. So I'll typically get one side in, start one there, start one over here. Then I'll go over here. And of course it's easy to pull them back out of this side while you're over here fiddling with this side. So again, it's just a kind of a bit of a dance here to get this done. You don't want it dropping. Okay, so now I'm going to try to get these guys in. But you can see that went down so far, it's hard to get it. So I'm going to kind of pull this in, and I'm using my hand over here to slide it down in there. Again, I don't have good video shot of this for you guys, but you get the idea what I'm doing. Okay, so now the 2 bottom ones are in. We're good. So now I'm going to reposition the center ones so they're kind of where they need to be as I'm going down. Gently lower it down. Now I got my center one in the right place there. And now I'll get the center one in the right place here. And of course, having a motor mounted to this kind of makes it more interesting.
And if it's too tight, you can always reach in with your finger and, you know, just kind of loosen one of them up and get it to slide down. Now I'm going to leave it right about there towards the top. I'm going to have my tilt. I'm barely going to have any tilt on this. Now I can get in, get my wrench, and make sure I'm even and running them in. And kind of, I'm not going to get them real tight yet. I'm just going to snug them up so it won't move on me. So yeah, you can't see this part, but that's what I'm doing. Okay, so actually that one went easier than I thought it would. All right, so, and of course the act of tightening these bolts up brings these back in, right? So where they, in fact, they're a lot tighter than they were because now we've got them snugged up a little bit here. Now, of course, you can't forget to come back down on the sides here and tighten up those recessed or countersunk flathead bolts once you're done up here. And then you go around again and tighten everything up again. But there we have it. Now you can bring in your motor and mount it, or if my motor was already on there, then I'm done except for tightening everything back up. So there it is, yeah. And again, once this is tightened down all the way, this one or the one for the Podium series from Fanatic, it is just a rock solid mount. And I tell you, it's something to behold if you've never been driving on one of the direct drive wheels when it's mounted like that. Right, so yeah, the only thing left to do now is get to the shifter mount. Now let's take a look at the shifter mount system that SimLabs uses on their P1-X. So basically what we have is a 4080 piece of profile here, which is the upright that runs along the side of the length of the cockpit, and this is 580 millimeters long. This over here is the upright support that will be sitting on like this. All right. And this is 320 mil long. Now they also throw in a couple of pieces, which is nice of them, of 200 millimeter 40 profiles. And typically that'll be used for mounting our shifter. We'll take a look at that in a minute. All right, so this is very easy to do. I'm going to do this upside down so you guys can see it better. But this piece here is just going to sit perpendicular to the lengthwise crossing profile here. And we're just going to put a couple of corner brackets in here. And because we have matching channels, we don't have to snap the tabs off, and they'll fit in there just like that. Then we can take a couple more, and this is going to be going to the front, and this is going to mount directly to the front edge of the 4120 profile that is serving the wheelbase support as far as the upright. And this is going to fit there like this, and this one will fit underneath like this. Oops, get it the right way, Barry. Sometimes you wonder why you can't get it right. It's upside down, that's why. So we have two of these here, and of course it's a very simple thing of putting in the two T-nuts in the upright profile and a couple more T-nuts on this one and this one, and then just bolt it all together, and there you go. Same with this, very simple thing. We put in our T-nuts and we bolt that down. They do have, now because remember that wheel upright, if you remember when we did that, there is a spacer, the plate they use to mount that to the side of the 4160 profiles is a 10 millimeter thick attachment bracket. All right. So because of that, if we don't, this is going to be mounted, this long piece is going to be offset 10 millimeters from the actual bottom profile because of where it's going to bolt to the front of that wheel upright, okay, or wheelbase support upright. So if we just put this on here like that, this would be kind of flapping in the wind. We'd have a 10 millimeter gap on this one. So they include this bracket here as part of the mounting process. And yeah, this is a counterboard or countersunk hole on the middle, and we got two more on the other side. This is 10 millimeters thick. So of course what we do here is, let me go ahead and throw this in here, a little upright here, and we'll take our flathead screw, because remember we want this to go into this countersunk portion, and I'll go ahead and put that on real quick just so we can take a look at how this thing comes together here. And this, you want to make sure while you're doing this, depending on where you want it. Of course, you need to adjust this back and forth as far as where the height is of this. So this allows us for this bar to go up and down. So we can adjust the height of our shifter or handbrake, whatever we're putting on here. But as we go up and down, we also need to go up and down with this bracket. Now we have 4 channels on a 4160 side profile, so we don't have to move it too much probably to get it. Once you get your height right, then you'll go in and fix this to where you want it so it will match the channel, one of the channels of the 4 on that 160. I'm going to put it down here just for using sake. And you want to make sure when you put it in there that it's perpendicular, right? So we want this to be nice and square, perpendicular to the upright here. Right. So now, once we find the right height, and this is a simulated 40-160, but it's only a 40-80. But again, we have 2 channels here that we can actually pick to put some T-nuts in to affix these holes, right? So these holes are actually going to be holding this onto the side of our base profiles, which are the 40-160s. Simple, right? So the only thing is you have to make sure you adjust this part right so it fits. And if you're going to change the level of your shifter or handbrake at any time, then you're going to have to pull this off to get to this, what I call the blind bolt that you can't see, right? But it's there holding everything nice and tight. So that's the only thing. Again, most people, 99% of the people out there who have a P1 aren't going to, no big deal. They don't change the height of their shifter or their handbrake stuff very much. Someone like me, though, I'm always changing it, right? Because I'm doing videos and reviewing all kinds of stuff. So, yeah, this works fine. And you got to have this space, though. You got to have the spacer. But I have other solutions. And again, Profile is like the unlimited solution provider for no matter what problem you have or what you're trying to achieve with it, you can get it done. But this certainly looks nice. It matches the black and, of course, the texture and everything, the thickness of the brackets on the wheel upright supports, or the wheelbase upright supports. So, easy enough. That'll go on there like that. And, yeah, let's see, what else we got? Now, when you're going to mount your shifter, let's get this out of the way. You can, manufacture your own plate and mount it on this, or mount it from the side, or whatever you want to do. But they did give us these nice 200 millimeter pieces of profile here, and I'm going to, this is typically the way I would set this up. Now, I can move these sideways, right? If it's something over here, like my seat's too close to this, I can actually move this out, as long as I still have enough area here to match the flange on my shifter. Okay, this is not going to work right. Stuff's going to be flying everywhere. All right, so I would typically mount these with some angle brackets. I put one here, I put one over here. Right, but we're going to have to take the tabs off of these, because remember, we got some crossing channels here, and that's just the way it works. And it doesn't matter if I mounted it down here, I would still have a crossing channel problem. So I put it here, and you can see it's not high enough to interfere with whatever you put on the top here, even if you just put another plate on top. And then I put a couple more here and here. Put this one here. Yeah. So then we'll have a setup that looks like that. All right. Now, again, I can actually move these if I have interference, or even cut them down if you want to. I mean, if you have a custom setup with a shifter or something, and you're not going to need that much length, then yeah, take them out through your chop saw and cut them off. Then we'll move this over if I need to. Of course, I can only move it so far depending on the width of the flange of the shifter I'm putting on here. So, to demonstrate that, I'll put very carefully, I'll put my ProSim shifter up here. This is a Quaife ProSim, right? Sequential, very cool shifter. And I'll put that here. It's a little bit short, so I'll just move this in a little. There we go. And get it centered so it doesn't fall off. All right. So actually, I could cut this off, both of these sides of this, or obviously just one side, so it fit the flange width here. So I don't have all this excess sticking out. Just dress it up a little bit. Or if you're going to be changing stuff a lot, you might want to leave them there. But if you got an interference over here, I can actually bring them over as long as I have enough room left for the flange on this side, right? Because if I took it too far, I wouldn't have that. So then bolt everything down, bolt this to down here. Remember, we've got some nice 6 mil nuts in here, a whole bag of them, the 6 mil and 5 mil T-nuts and bolts. So you can go down, and this actually takes a 6 mil, this flange here. And once you have all this bolted down, I'm not worried about so much it twisting, because it won't twist anyway once you have it bolted down solidly, really. And we're not putting a twisting motion on a sequential shifter. Maybe a little bit of lateral motion on an H-pattern shifter, but not that much to matter, really, I don't think, because I've used it this way on my H-pattern too and never had a problem. The important part, I think, is that you need to make sure, can you do it without dumping it all off? All right, so when we're shifting a sequential, especially a sequential, we're hammering it back and forth. So that's where the pressure is on this bar, right? And the front of the bar up here is hooked up to the wheelbase support upright, so no problem there. In the back of it, we have the bottom piece here that's firmly attached underneath it, so everything's good there. Now everything where the forces are in that direction
back and forth is well supported, especially obviously with 2 corner brackets on each one of these bars. You could probably get away with 1 if you're not, you know, real aggressive. But I like to put 2 on there because I like to slam things pretty hard. Sometimes I don't know why, I just do. And yeah, so again, do it the way you want to, but this is just showing you one way to do it. Now what we're going to do is go ahead and mount it onto the rig, and when we get back, we'll walk over to the rig and do a flyby there and see how I end up mounting it up rather. Now we can take a look at the shifter mount now that it's mounted, and you can see down here we have the spacer unit installed, and like I said, you see how that's sticking out 10 millimeters because over here we also have 10 millimeters sticking out, and we have the 2 angle brackets, or corner brackets rather, holding the front piece on, and we've got the 2 holding the back piece on. So if I ever have to adjust this up or down, then it's a matter of, here's 2 ways you can do it. The easiest way would be to, hopefully your adjustment would be the distance between these 2 channels here, and then you wouldn't have to worry about this. As the whole thing moves up, you just put your T-nuts in there and then bolt it in, you're good to go. Or lower one groove. That's one good thing about this. Well, there's many good things about this 4160 profile, the heavy duty unit here. But yeah, it's got plenty of channels for you to do that. But then again, if your perfect height for your shifter is just in between those channels, then you're going to have to pull this off again and readjust this part to the right height so it matches one of these channels. Not too hard to do. Like I said, it's just like anything else with the 80/20. Once you do it a few times, you get used to it. So yeah, it's looking good there. And a very solid unit, and of course, because we have this mounted in the longitudinal direction here on this platform, or the chassis, it's going to be very, very sturdy. I can attest to that. I've been using mine for years, my P1, and yeah, it's really a very solid mount for all kinds of shifters or handbrakes combinations. Right, so now that's done, we can just do, we'll get to a final look at this. I guess I'll just do a final flyby on everything, talk about it, and then we'll get to our final thoughts. So now for a look at the finished cockpit. And yeah, everything went together as you guys saw. If you were following along, everything went together just perfectly. And you can see I've got the caps installed now. Again, that's just put the caps on. Sometimes you have to tap them in with a mallet or something. You know, our seat rails are pretty much where I need them to be for mounting a seat too. And yeah, so we're just going to walk around here and see what the final product looks like. Very sturdy unit, as we know the P1 to be. And you know what I like about this is that SimLabs only made improvement where they really felt that there could be an improvement made. And that was in this pedal tray right here. And this pedal tray, as you can see, I have the 4160 towards the front, but you can mount this any way you want to. You can turn this whole thing around 180 degrees. In fact, I think on their site they have a picture of it that way. It just doesn't matter. It depends on what your own personal needs and wants are going to be. Now, I have short legs, so that's why I have it oriented this way. Someone with longer legs might want to flip it around and go the other way. But again, that's what's great about this profile. There's no one way. No one way is the right way. You can just do it any way you want to. This wheelbase support is just legendary of how stiff this is. I mean, you can... this thing is just... Nothing gets as stiff as the P1 wheelbase support. Now, from what I've seen on the Husingveld one, it's probably in comparable stiffness, I would imagine. But yeah, that would be the only one that would be about as stiff as this is, because this is just rock solid, and it gives you such a great feeling when you're using a direct drive force feedback servo motor when it's bolted to that. Or again, like I said before, if you have a podium, you could use their mount, and yeah, it's just a lot stiffer than the actual flat or wheelbase mount that we would use for like Logitech's Thrustmasters. And you know, the cool thing was I was on the site looking around, and the price did not change depending on which wheel mount I chose. So front facing was the same price as the Podium Series one, as was the regular, what they call wheel deck plate. So yeah, looking good in black, and I got the covers on where I wanted to put them. Again, I usually don't put them in some places where you're not going to be able to see them once everything's mounted up. But again, that's personal preference, and you can do it any way you want. So yeah, I hope you guys were able to pick up some tips, and yeah, you can see how just easy this is to build. Once you just know how the T-nuts and the bolts work on this system, yeah, pretty simple stuff really.
And it's just so versatile, and just like I said, sitting on a granite boulder when you're in these chassis. Right, so we'll just get on to the final thoughts. Final thoughts on the SimLabs P1 Cockpit Kit. I've been using the P1 Cockpit for almost 2 years now, and has yet to fail me in any way. So when I heard that SimLab was going to bring out an updated P1, now called the P1-X, I was at first concerned that some of the changes it would bring to the table would not be to my liking. But when I saw the P1-X was essentially going to be a P1 with a new pedal tray configuration, I breathed a sigh of relief. As too many manufacturers change things that already work great, and the result is actually less than what we had before. My P1-X kit was delivered in what I consider to be as good a packaging solution that one can use to minimize the potential for damage. Of course, when shipping such heavy materials, there's always the possibility that damage can occur if not handled properly. The P1-X kit I received had all the required hardware to complete the assembly process, so no last-minute trips to the hardware store to source some missing bolts or screws. I think once you become familiar with the way that the fastening system works with aluminum profile, you won't want to construct a cockpit in any other way. I can't think of a more easier or versatile material to use here. As most of you know, I am constantly changing things on my cockpit to accommodate various review material, and my former P1 and now the new P1-X certainly shine in this respect. The new pedal tray that the P1-X sports is a very heavy-duty unit, and it finally gives us the ability to raise the pedal tray to different heights, ensuring you can get a proper ergonomic seating position. If only other cockpit manufacturers would take notice of this much needed but mostly missing pedal tray feature. The wheelbase mount solutions offered by SimLab cover any of the existing wheelbases currently on the market, and the direct drive wheel mounts offered by SimLab are rock solid solutions that, in my opinion, are essential to realizing all the fine details your direct drive wheelbase is capable of delivering. Now, buying a profile cockpit in kit form is not the only way to go when looking to build an aluminum extrusion cockpit, but I have to say, it is a great way to go when you want to minimize the drama of sourcing all the hardware and fastener bits you're going to need. And the SimLab P1-X kit will make your life much easier in that regard, as everything you need is in a kit that is delivered to your door. Now, the SimLab P1 and now the P1-X are the cockpits to have if you want a rock-solid solution as far as the platform you're using for racing, and you want to customize it to your own personal requirements. And I'm not the only one who thinks this, apparently, because there's currently a 3-week waiting list before your cockpit can be shipped. I'm Barry Rowland. Thanks again for watching the Sim Racing Garage channel. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button. And if you would like to help support what I do here at the SRG, visit my website at simracinggarage.com.